Okay, we have started. Hello, we are Run the East Coast, and our goal is to increase running distance.
The original study we chose is using goal setting and feedback to increase weekly running distance conducted by Wack, Crossland, and Milton Berger. This study was found in the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. As a group, we collaborated and discussed multiple studies that we each found interesting. We chose this particular study because everyone in this group had the motivation to increase their running distance, and the study was a single subject design that could be replicated. The participants from this study included 5 adult females in the range of 18 to 28 years of age. They were all in good physical health, had no conditions that would be putting them at risk, and a desire to increase their running distance. Data and collection and design. A multiple baseline design was used to graph data on number of miles ran per week, with an embedded changing criterion design for intervention 2. The procedure of this study ran 2 different interventions. The first intervention monitored the daily progress of each participant and implemented goal setting for each individual run. The second intervention took place of intervention 1. The second intervention implemented weekly progress monitoring and goal setting for total weekly mileage every 2 weeks if previous criteria was met. The results for this study showed that goal setting and feedback was effective in increasing running distance among participants. One purpose is to discern if the results of our group are comparable to the results achieved in the study. The other is to evaluate the effectiveness of goal setting and performance feedback on increasing running distance.
Modifications from the original study. The Nike Run Club app was used instead of the Nike Plus Sport Kit because of the ease of access via smartphone. Not all participants had the Nike Plus Sport Kit. The study began using Intervention 2, weekly goal setting and feedback instead of daily goal setting and feedback. Participants were chosen through assignment rather than recruitment. The speed changed to 3.5 miles per hour to allow participants to walk at a brisk pace. Intervention 2 was chosen for the replication study, which consisted of a change criterion design based on a weekly goal achievement. The materials needed. You needed a smartphone, running shoes, running clothes, the Nike Run Club app installed, supplemental methods of data collection, access to Google Sheets, files for data recording and monitoring, Google Hangouts for weekly feedback. Participants. There were 6 female adults in the range of 23 to 32 in age, who are all enrolled as a student in the Special Education 611 course at Ball State University. The first participant is Alexis Simon, Brittany Williams, Francis Torres, Kayleen Lowe, Lindsay Bell, and Tracy Arnold.
Setting. Since participants live throughout the East Coast where the weather is often unpredictable, running episodes could take place in any environment that supports the running criteria. For some examples of different environments include a treadmill at the participant's house or gym, the participant's neighborhood, a local park, and a track. To discuss weekly progress and give feedback to each other, weekly meetings will take place via Google Hangouts, since in-person meetings are not feasible, being that participants are not local to each other. Behavior and definition. The behavior that we targeted was running, and running can be defined as taking continuous steps at a speed faster than 3.5 miles per hour. This definition also allows our participants to run, jog, or walk briskly if unable to run for extended periods of time. An example of running would be when you turn on the Nike Plus app, it will say beginning workout as you begin to run, and distance will continue to increase as the participant moves. A non-example would be with the app saying workout pause if the participant stops moving or is not moving fast enough. Every instance for the Nike Plus app or supplemental measurement system, which includes Fitbit and treadmill screens, is in use, and the behavioral definition of running is being met, will be measured as usable data for baseline. A baseline of 0 is also usable data. Since each participant's schedule is different and may vary from week to week, there is no minimum or maximum amount of time or specific hours or days that must be committed. Weekly baseline data is reported on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. during the Google Hangout meeting. A running week goes from Thursday to Wednesday. Each participant also used the Nike Plus Run app or the supplemental measurement system during episodes of running, but no goal setting took place until baseline ended. Weekly data was shared on the Nike Plus Run app as well as recorded on Google Sheets.
The intervention phase is to see the effect of goal setting and feedback on running performance. The participant may collect data at any point throughout the week. There is no set minimum or maximum amount of time or specific hours or days that must be committed. Weekly goals are set on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. One running week goes from Thursday to Wednesday. At the beginning of the intervention phase, participants set an initial long-term goal for the end of the intervention, along with a short-term weekly mileage goal. Short-term goals were determined once previous goals were maintained for 2 weeks. If a weekly goal was not met, the participant stayed at the goal for the week. New goals were reported to the group via Google Hangouts, the Nike Run app, and Google Spreadsheets each Wednesday at 7 p.m. Participants also provided feedback to each other during Wednesday meetings due to the lack of a third-party primary researcher. Data collection. Weekly goals and current week's mileages were charted by each individual on Google Spreadsheet and the Nike Run app, or a supplemental method of data collection. Distance, data, and mileages is rounded to the nearest 10th decimal were reported and graphed. The end of the week was every Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. The IOA data was collected, shared, and viewed by all participants through the Nike Run app or an alternative method of data collection. Accurate mileages is calculated by the app and the participants paired up to collect IOA using Google Sheets. The measures were also calibrated equally through the app. The app will also be cross-referenced to Google Sheets for each participant by their partners. So this is my graph, and my name is Kayleen. I'm from Michigan. I'm 23 years old. And before starting it, I would always exercise. But basically, my first week, I started had a baseline of 0, and I didn't end up running at all that week. The next week I set a baseline of 0. I bumped it up. I had 5 miles. The next week I also had a baseline of 0, but then I ended up running 7. The next week I bumped my baseline up to 5, but I didn't hit it and I only ran 3. The next week I kept my same baseline, but then I bumped it up to 12 miles. The next week I also had 5. I ran 8, and so then I bumped my baseline up to 7, and I hit it with 7. Then I bumped it up to 8, and then I ended up running 8 miles that week. A little bit about my running description and reflection. So the environment that I ran in was mostly on a treadmill, except for 1 week I was in Florida, so I was running on the beach. The data tracking I did was through my Apple Watch because the Nike Run app didn't work for me. So I had all my workouts done on my watch, and then I sent all the information to my partner for the IOA data collection. My attitude towards running before the intervention, I was working out 3 to 5 days a week just out of habit. Most of the days I did 15 minutes of cardio, either on a stationary bike, Stairmaster, or elliptical. Running has been an impartial activity my whole life. In high school, it was very important to me. My junior and senior year, I was an all-state runner in cross country. It's always been a big part of my life, just not as much as an adult. I got busy and wasn't as fun. But during the intervention, I decided I'll start running, or I'm going to start training for a 5K. And I'd like to work my way up to a half marathon. So the study has really helped me remember how much I do like to run and that I'm actually pretty good at it. For the continuation of goal setting, I'm going to continue to set goals for running, but I will have to increase the mileage because I'm going to run a 5K. So I will have to, instead of running 5 miles a week or 6 miles a week, I will need to be running like 3 miles a day. So the mileage is going to increase as far as my goal setting.
My name is Frances. I'm 32 years old. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, but currently I live in Florida. This is my graph. As you can see, baseline was 0, and I set my criterion for the first week to 1 mile due to my baseline being so low, and then slowly increased it to 1.5 miles for the following week. My intervention range was 0 to 2.1 miles, and my intervention average was 0 to 0.96. Here you can see my graph. Baseline, obviously 0, and you can see variability in the data. There's really no trend. And next slide. My description and reflections. Running environment was mostly exclusively done at the gym because my app didn't work since it's GPS and I can't run around my neighborhood. It wouldn't track my running on a treadmill. So what I chose to do was take a photo of the workout session summary and posted it to the Google Hangouts every week and also to my IOA partner at the end of the study. And then my attitude towards running before the intervention. Running, I find it enjoyable, but it's not a preferred method for me of exercise unless I'm feeling lots of anxiety and stress, and it's a good way to release all of that energy. During the intervention, around baseline, I was taking daily morning yoga classes that were kind of strenuous, so that lowered my motivation to engage in running also simultaneously as a means of exercise. And in addition, when I was at the gym, running was the first part of my workout, and the second part included weightlifting. So maybe because it wasn't so much of a focus, I really didn't have a high mileage set. After the intervention, running is still enjoyable, but only, as I said before, in times of acute stress, because it provides a higher release of anxiety than a yoga workout. So it's determined by my psychological context. And continuation of goal setting. Due to my own preferences of exercise, I will not continue to engage in goal setting for running as a target behavior, but I may incorporate goal setting for weekly frequency of exercise of any type, depending on the function and needs or availability.
I'm Brittany Williams, and this is my second semester at Ball State Graduate School. I am 22 years old, and I reside in Florida. So on my graph, as you can see, my baseline started off at 0, so it was really low. And then in weeks 4, 5, and 6, I started to set a goal of 2 miles. In week 4, I didn't quite meet my 2-mile goal. And week 5 and 6, I did meet my goal. So then I transitioned in week 7 and 8, starting a new goal of 3 miles. And I met them both of those weeks. And my reason for starting off so slow was because I found out I was pregnant and I didn't want to rush into it. And my goals didn't go so high because via my doctor's orders, not to put too much stress and strain on my body, but I did increase in mileage and started to meet my goals eventually throughout the study. On my graph, you can see where my goals and my miles ran per week were at 0, which were doing my baseline. You can also see where I set my goal for week 4 to 2 miles, but I only got 1.5. Then you can see in the rest of my weeks where I started to hit my goals and started to make new goals. My running environment typically was through my neighborhood or on an indoor or outdoor track. I didn't do too much running on a treadmill because I hate running in place and I like seeing different things. I feel stuck on a treadmill, so I didn't like it much. My data tracking method was mostly via Fitbit or on my iPhone because the Nike app just wasn't working on my phone well, and I couldn't get it to work right even after I reinstalled it. My attitude before running, I felt like it gave me a reason to work out and would push me to get in shape and be active. But during the intervention, once I found out I was pregnant, it got hard to initially get out there and start running. But eventually I started meeting my goals. After the intervention, I felt like I met my goals and I started motivating myself to get out there more. And I didn't necessarily get in shape as I wanted to because I'm getting bigger, clearly. But it helped me stay active for my pregnancy, and it just gives me a reason to go exercise. The continuation of my goal setting. So my continuation jumped throughout the intervention, but after, I don't know if I'm going to continue running because it takes a lot of energy out of me, and I'm not in a place where I can continue to do that much. But maybe later, once I'm not pregnant anymore. Okay.
Hi, my name is Tracy Arnold. I am 28 years old and I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. As you can see from my table and graph, my baseline average is 11.7 miles per week, and my criteria 1 average is 12.5 miles each week. I set my criteria 1 goal at 15 miles when I should have set my goal closer to my baseline average to reach my criterion 1 goal. My graph shows a varying graph with a baseline range of 0 to 20.2 miles each week, and criteria 1 range of 7 to 16.7 miles per week. The wide range is because of my family emergencies that came up. My family's from Illinois, so there was a lot of traveling back and forth. I had to go out of town a few days throughout some of the weeks. This interrupted my daily routine, and my running goal was hindered for that. So my running environment included on the treadmill and or outside around my neighborhood. Data tracking, my summary of workout sessions were recorded through Nike Plus app and or the Fitbit app. Both apps were utilized in case of technical issues with one or the other, which did happen, to make sure I had a backup when tracking my running mileage. My attitude towards running before the intervention, I've always enjoyed running as a leisure activity. It helps me get started in the morning before work, helps me stay in shape physically and mentally, and it helps me reduce my stress and anxiety. After the intervention, I still enjoy running very much and will continue to use it in my daily routines.
My name is Lindsay Bale, and I also live in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am 26 years old and in my second semester at Ball State's ABA program. This is my data set and my graph. My 3 weeks of baseline did show some variability. I had an unexpected illness and death in my family during the first week of baseline, so I was unable to find the time or motivation to run. But during the second week, I was able to run 4 miles, and the third week was 1.5 miles. So my range for baseline was 0 to 4 miles, and the average was 1.8. For the first phase in the intervention, I set my goal to 5 miles. Since I only ran 4 miles the first week, I did not meet my goal, so I had to stay at the phase for 2 more weeks. During this phase, I noticed that it was difficult for me to find time to go to the gym after work. During the weeks, I only increased my goal by 1 mile for a total of 6 for my second phase in the intervention. Although I managed to run some during these 2 weeks, I unfortunately did not reach my goal. I do believe if I had more time for this intervention, I would have been able to reach my goal. During both of my intervention phases, there's not much variability in my data. My interventions ranged from 3.5 to 5 miles with an average of 4.5 miles. My running environment included a treadmill at the gym, but when the weather was nice enough, which, like I said, is unpredictable in Indiana, I was able to run outside around my neighborhood. I used the Nike Plus app on my phone and on my watch to keep my data. My attitudes towards running before the intervention, running is something that I wish I enjoyed, but I never have. But I still had the motivation to do it more frequently. During the intervention, since I had already wanted to increase my weekly running distance before starting the intervention, I was definitely more motivated to run each week and meet my goal. After the intervention, I still do not love running, but it did become more manageable and slightly more enjoyable as the weeks went on. The continuation of goal setting. Although I feel like setting weekly goals help motivate me to run more each week, I will not continue setting goals for myself each week. However, I will make sure that I continue to find time each week to run and find a place where I enjoy running more.
Hello, my name is Alexis Simon, and I live in Orlando, Florida. I'm in my second semester at Ball State in the ABA program. During baseline, the first week, I pretty much did 1.5 miles, then 1.4 and 1.4 for the consecutive weeks. I didn't run too much before that, but starting the study was a little bit motivating for me, so I wanted to get an average baseline. So my first criteria I set was 2.5 miles per week, which I did great during the fourth week. I did 3.2 miles, and then I kind of fell to 1 mile the fifth week, raised it back up in the sixth week to 2.9, and then 2.5 in the seventh. But the last week I kind of had some foot and knee pain, so I didn't want to push it too much. So I didn't have any miles for the eighth week. My baseline average is 1.4 miles, and my intervention average was about 2.4 miles. So my running environment was outdoors around my neighborhood. Since around this time of year, Florida is really nice. It was actually really nice to actually run outside and run around my neighborhood a little bit. I did use the Nike Run Club app to track all my episodes of running. As far as my attitude towards running before the intervention, I would occasionally run here and there, but it definitely wasn't a preferred method of exercise. And usually when I ran, it was with my dogs, who would stop and slow down since they are older. They're like 11 years old. So this method would not have met the criteria for the running used in this study. Once baseline started, it motivated me to run on my own without my dogs and to meet the criteria. Just wanted to try it myself. But typically beforehand, I would do yoga at home or sometimes cardio videos found on YouTube once or twice a week for 30 minutes. So not super often. In my job, I'm pretty physically active. So sometimes it's difficult for me to get the motivation to exercise afterwards. But during the intervention, I was definitely motivated to meet my criteria. But since I was inexperienced with consistent running, I did experience some pain and slight injury to my knee and foot. This is possibly due to the shoes I decided to buy. But as the study went on, it did become a lot easier to meet my goals. I feel that motivation from my peers in my group was helpful in achieving them more so than goal setting itself. After the intervention, I had a more positive attitude toward running, and it was less intimidating to actually get outside and run, especially now that I have the proper equipment and a little bit more experience. Running is more likely to occur. As far as the continuation of my goals, I won't likely use goal setting as motivation to become more physically active, but I did invest in a good pair of exercise shoes and have been running about 3 miles per week, along with doing YouTube videos at home that focus on yoga and some cardio exercises. I'm still being a little bit cautious during exercise to ensure I don't further injury to my knees or feet. And I will likely continue to use the Nike Run app to track my progress, since it gives some pretty good information on the consistency I'm running, the speed, and it has useful guided runs and notifies you when you get to certain points in your run. Like if you run a mile, it'll say you ran a mile and it took you 10 minutes and 30 seconds or however long it is. Also, since I live in Florida, once it gets warmer during the summer, running outdoors, I know for a fact is going to be more challenging because it definitely gets really miserable. So I might have to accommodate for that. All right, now we are on to the comparison of data. After baseline, the participants ran between 0 and 15 miles each week. Contrasting to the original study, most of the participants' data was a little bit variable and showed as the study went on. The original studies did span over a period of 20 weeks, where our replication only lasted 8 weeks. So a little bit more time to replicate the study may have made the comparison more accurate and allowed for more criterion changes. For a few of the participants in the initial study, the first few weeks seemed variable as well, but the other participants in the initial study clearly showed only an increasing trend. But this is also partly because instead of being assigned, they were recruited. So they were maybe a little bit more motivated to run than some of us were. This is our IOA. Everybody got 100% because mostly we did track it through a method that was pretty concrete. As long as we could add and multiply and divide, it shouldn't have varied too much. Treatment fidelity. It was taken through the Nike Run app or the supplemental methods of data collection that some of us use, which was the Fitbit or the treadmill screen. Google Sheets was used to monitor each of our progress. And at the start of the week, we inputted our short-term goal. If the previous criteria was met, then at the conclusion of the week, we entered the total miles we actually ran on a Google Sheet, and that was shared and reviewed among all of us. Our weekly meetings via Google Hangouts were scheduled to highlight performances, discuss goals, monitor progress, and express concerns with performance. So this is our checklist that we use pretty much every week. It varied a little bit each week, which would be illustrated in our research design, but we had our exercise clothes, shoes, and other materials were used every session of running. Every week, we attended our hangout meetings at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays, and we collected baseline data using the app for 3 weeks. Then we inputted our baseline data into Google Sheets by Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. After baseline was over, we set an initial performance goal, and then we had to perform the target behavior according to the operational definition. Our weekly mileage data was inputted to Google Sheets each Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. And we also calculated our IOA for our assigned reliability partner each week. If the criteria was met for 2 consecutive weeks, a new performance criterion was set. And we also made sure to provide meaningful feedback to others during our weekly meetings. Some of the limitations were that some of us were unable to use the original app intended due to technological difficulties. They used alternate methods of data collection, as said before, and it was approved by the professor prior to the beginning of our study. One member chose for Fitbit, and another member collected data photographically from the summarized workout session on the treadmill. And as indicated before as well, we only had a limited number of weeks to record the results. So some of our conclusions: overall, the intervention showed success as many of us increased our running from baseline. Some participants' data set levels during baseline were low and increased throughout, albeit mostly in a variable fashion instead of an upwards increasing trend line. More weeks of recording may have indicated some more comparable results to the original study. Group participants did show results that differed from that of the original study's second intervention, which was the weekly goals and feedback versus the daily goals and feedback. Our results showed variable data, whereas the results by WAC in the original study showed an upward increasing trend for pretty much all of the participants.
During our empirical research, we discovered some possible variables that may account for the differences and similarities that Alexis just mentioned. In a study by Murtash and Ince, 2018, they discovered that adherence to a fitness program by women depended on the type of exercise and whether it is a preferred type, with a preferred type yielding greater results. The original study by Wack et al., 2014, also, as previously mentioned, used flyers to recruit individuals who already had an interest in increasing running. The study by Murtash and Ince also examines the subjects using the self-determination theory, where it is purported that women with intrinsic motivations for exercise will have greater adherence to fitness programs. Seeing as the replication of this study might not have been an intrinsic motivating factor for the chosen behavior of running, that could have been a reason why goal setting alone did not demonstrate an increasing trend of data across all of the participants. In another study by Ward and Carnes, 2002, public posting of self-set goals in college football athletes proved to be a successful intervention. Goal setting as a concept for increasing desired behavior does seem to be an effective intervention in many different athletic environments, such as rugby, which was showed in a study by Melilou et al., 2006, and in soccer by a study from Brobst and Ward, 2002. This intervention can even be extrapolated to different types of behavior, such as safety performance in job sites, as shown in a study by Reber et al., 1990. Feedback on performance was another variable included in the original replication study by Wack et al., and was deemed to be effective when combined with self-set goals in the study by Brobst and Ward, 2002, regarding performance of female soccer players during scrimmages. Although in this study, the results had limited generalization to performance during game setting. Yet, when analyzing the context, we, the subjects of the replication study, are posed with variations that might be deemed significant from the original study. All of these individuals were engaging in presumably a sport of preference or in behaviors that were most likely intrinsically motivating rather than extrinsic. An interesting way to tackle lack of motivation in exercise seems to be the trans-theoretical model of behavior change, where behavior change is thought of being dynamic rather than an all or nothing phenomenon, and this is contrasted to the approach of goal setting. In the trans-theoretical model, behavior change is achieved by going through 5 stages, namely pre-contemplation, where there's no intention of becoming physically active, contemplation, thinking about becoming physically active, preparation, making small changes in behavior but still not meeting a criterion for physical activity, and action, meeting a criterion of physical activity, but only recently, usually within the past 6 months. Although this model is not an ideal process for any individual who is already an active participant, because it would unnecessarily lengthen the process due to the subject already being in an action state and having gone through all the previous stages. In this regard, goal setting could be considered as a more sensible option for intervention. Self-efficacy as an agent for behavior change is important to consider whenever evaluating motivations of behavior. Self-efficacy is a concept originally defined by Albert Bandura, 1982, as a personal judgment of how well one can execute courses of action required to deal with prospective situations. In other words, it's how capable you feel of doing a certain behavior or completing a certain task. In addition, in a study by Schwarzer et al. 2007, they state that good intentions are more likely to be translated into action when people develop success scenarios and preparatory strategies of approaching the difficult task. Recovery self-efficacy, defined as the individual's belief in their own capabilities for successfully completing a target behavior after being derailed, and strategic planning seem to be the best predictors of various health behaviors according to the aforementioned study. Marshall and Biddle, 2001, also touch upon the concept of self-efficacy, where they state that 3 factors are hypothesized to mediate the change process: the individual self-efficacy for change, the decisional balance of perceived advantages and disadvantages of change, and the strategies and techniques, also known as the process of change, individuals use to modify their thoughts, feelings, and behavior. In this article, the authors summarize that behavior change involves a systematic evaluation of the potential gains, called pros, and the losses, named cons, associated with the new behavior. And referencing, again, the trans-theoretical model, pros and cons are also suggested as important for predicting the transitions between pre-contemplation, contemplation, and preparation. We concluded that, similar to the concept of priming, where antecedent strategies are used in order to prepare the learner for completion of a demanding task, perhaps the original study could have also benefited from an incorporation of antecedent strategies and planning methods, such as those outlined in the previous references, e.g. evaluating pros and cons prior to implementing goal setting and feedback interventions. And these are our references. Group contributions. And speaker notes. Thank you for listening.